All right, let's just jump right into this. Picture this. Thousands of U.S. Marines are being mobilized, rushed to the Middle East. And the mission, at least hypothetically, it's an operation against Iran. But, this isn't some massive, full-scale invasion force. We are talking about a much more specialized, surgical kind of unit.
So that's really the million-dollar question we're digging into here. How could a relatively small forward-deployed force actually make a dent, a real strategic impact, against a country as large and as powerful as Iran? The analysis we're breaking down lays out 4 very different options, from the totally conventional to, well, something else entirely.
Now, the force we're talking about is a Marine Expeditionary Unit, a MIU for short. And the best way to think about it is like the Swiss Army knife of the U.S. military. It's a self-contained task force on the water with about 2,200 Marines and sailors designed to be the first ones in when a crisis kicks off. It's all about speed and immediate impact.
But, and this is a huge but, here's the catch. While the whole unit is over 2,000 strong, the actual number of boots that can hit the sand in an amphibious assault is much, much smaller. We're talking about maybe 1,200 Marines. So the bottom line is you are not invading a country with this. Any plan has to be surgical, it has to be clever. So what are the options really on the table?
Well, the first option is the one you've probably heard kicked around in the news. It's a direct shot at Iran's economic heart, a plan to seize Kharg Island. On paper, the logic seems pretty solid, right? Kharg Island is basically the jugular vein of the Iranian economy. A staggering 90% of their oil exports flow through this one tiny spot. So the thinking goes, if you can take the island, you could bring the whole regime to its knees without having to fight a massive war. Plus, the analysis points out that there may have already been strikes to soften up the island's defenses, kind of setting the stage. But what looks good on a PowerPoint slide can be an absolute nightmare in reality. And when you look at the details, this whole plan starts to fall apart, and fast. I mean, the MEU would have to sail 1,600 kilometers right through the Strait of Hormuz, which is a known kill zone, just bristling with Iranian threats. And even if they somehow managed to land, the Marines would just be sitting ducks on this tiny island getting hammered by endless missile and drone attacks. And how do you resupply them? How do you get reinforcements in? The analysis calls it simply unsustainable. Okay, so if a direct economic strike is a suicide mission, what's the next logical step? Well, how about controlling the strategic waterway itself? That brings us to option number 2, taking Qeshm Island to basically dominate the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Kesh is the biggest island in the Persian Gulf, and it's parked right at the mouth of the strait. So in theory, if you take it, you control the choke point. You can set up a forward operating base, and crucially, it has an airport you can use to fly in more troops and supplies. It gives you a lot more breathing room than tiny little Kharg Island.
But, and you knew there was a but coming, the analysis paints a pretty grim picture here. Qeshm is not some sleepy little island. It's described as a heavily fortified outpost for Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. They're talking about things like underground missile cities. And if that wasn't enough, you've also got a civilian population of 150,000 people to deal with.
And this really gets to the core of the problem. The analysis concludes that sending a small Marine force to attack a target this hardened would be, well, pretty much a disaster. It would be, as they put it, like walking right into a trap, a preset kill zone with absolutely no easy way out. All right, with the first 2 options looking like incredibly risky gambles, option 3 shifts gears completely. It says, let's avoid a big landing altogether and instead focus on a maritime security mission. So the idea here is to basically use the MEU's toys, its helicopters, its F-35 jets, its specialized boarding teams, to protect commercial ships and to choke off Iran's illegal oil trade. They'd act like armed bodyguards for tankers, hunt down those Iranian fast boats and drones, and even board and seize ships, which is something they already do in other parts of the world. Now, while this is for sure the lowest risk option when it comes to casualties, it's definitely not risk-free. It means you're keeping these incredibly valuable warships sitting in a dangerous neighborhood for a long, long time. And that's a huge logistical headache. But even more importantly, the analysis points out that a lot of these oil tankers are on their way to China. So if you start seizing them, you could easily trigger a massive international incident. And all of this brings us to the 4th and final option. This is the one the analysis argues is the most overlooked and maybe the most brilliant. It is a completely unconventional move that avoids that Persian Gulf kill zone altogether. It's called the Baluchistan Gambit. Okay, so let's look at a map for a second, because the geography here is everything. Landing in Iran's southeastern Baluchistan province means you completely bypass the massive Zagros Mountains. That's the natural defensive wall for the entire country. The naval force can get ready out in the open Arabian Sea, way far away from the threats packed into the Strait of Hormuz. And it's an area where U.S. air and naval power is already king.
But the geography is only half the story. The real key to this whole strategy, according to this analysis, isn't about the land. It's about the people who live on it. Take a look at this chart of Iran's ethnic groups. The one we really need to zoom in on is that highlighted slice, the Baloch people.
You see, the Baloch people are ethnically different and religiously different. They're Sunni, not Shia, like Iran's Persian majority. And that region has a long, long history of insurgency and pushing back against the government in Tehran. So here's the crucial point. Instead of landing in a totally hostile area, U.S. forces might actually be seen as liberators by a population that already hates the regime. They could find allies on the ground. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, defensibility. The terrain out there is flat and open, which is a total nightmare for any Iranian army trying to counterattack. They'd be spotted from the air miles away. There are only 3 main roads into the area, which creates perfect natural choke points. And once you capture the local port and airport, bringing in reinforcements like, say, the 82nd Airborne becomes a whole lot easier.
Okay, so we have just walked through 4 very different military options. Let's stack them all up side by side for one last look.
So here's the final breakdown. You can follow along right on the screen. The first 2 options, Kharg and Kashmir Islands, those are high-risk, head-on assaults against heavily defended fortresses. Option 3, the maritime mission, is safer for the troops, but it risks starting a much wider war. And that leaves us with option 4, Baluchistan. It avoids all of Iran's strengths and goes right after its weaknesses, but its success totally depends on being able to work with the local insurgency.
Ultimately, the analysis suggests the Baluchistan option isn't really just about seizing a port. It's about a much bigger, more disruptive goal. As the material puts it, the real plan might be to break Iran apart. By arming and supporting an insurgency, the goal shifts. It's not about defeating the Iranian military anymore. It's about creating so much internal chaos that the regime just can't handle it.
And this really leaves us with a final and pretty fascinating question to chew on. As we look at these different scenarios, it kind of forces us to think about how war itself is changing. Is the new path to victory not about brute force, not about seizing territory, but about finding and exploiting the cracks that already exist inside your enemy's society? That's something to think about.